Hello everyone, it's David from MDB Bootstrap, and we are about to start our live stream about coding basics. Let's just wait a few more seconds for more people to join. So if you guys want to follow me today and do all the exercise with me, please navigate to this website, mdbootstrap.com. I put it on chat. It's here. If you go there, you will find instruction how to install Visual Studio Code, which I'm gonna use in this live session, and also you'll get the file basics.zip where you can find all the files necessary for this lesson. So if you download this file, you will find index.html file in it, and this is what we're gonna be working on today. So just download it and open this with Visual Studio Code. So you can follow along. Okay, but before we move on to actually to the actual exercises, let's have a look at our agenda for today. We're gonna start with a small introduction about the IT career. So this webinar is about how to start your career within IT, how to make first steps, because we know that this is very confusing for all of you guys. And what we're gonna talk today about is we're gonna quickly start covering who we are. We as a MD Bootstrap. And then we'll quickly go through the main point of this presentation is what does it actually mean to be an IT guy in 2020, because this is probably quite difficult question to answer, in the sense that, you know, IT guy can mean like anything, right? It can be the guy who fixes your computer, it can be the guy who's programmer, it can be guy who works with networks, it can be guy who is developing games or doing the artificial intelligence. So we're gonna talk about this, and then we're gonna quickly see why it is actually a good idea to become a software programmer or a programmer or an IT guy, and how much you can earn in different countries. And then I'm gonna quickly cover different paths within the IT domain, which you can choose to start your career. And last but not the least, we will go into the coding exercise. So we're gonna start with the very, very basics, so you can guys get your hands on table with basics of the programming. Okay, just before we start, I also encourage you to join our Slack community, because if you have any questions, if you have any problems, if you are trying to learn something and you are having issue with some errors or answering some questions, you can always post question to our community, and there will be always someone from our development team to help you with this. So how you can do it? Simply navigate to the web page, which I just sent you. Probably you've seen it before, and here you have a button to join our Slack community. Okay, so let me quickly just in a few words say who we are. So we as a MD Bootstrap, we are a company who creates software. So we are creating the software for other developers. So we are creating software which is used by different developers, which helps them to create application, websites, and so on and so on. So our main product and material design for Bootstrap, MDB, is a framework, is a UI framework for building responsive applications, and it's currently used by over 1.5 million developers all around the world, and those are the companies which are using our software, like Nike, Amazon, even NASA. So I believe we have a credibility to teach others and to help others to become developers, because this is actually area of our expertise. But it's not about us, it's about you guys. So let's move on. And before, when I was preparing for this live session, I did a quick I check on different job portals, job offer portals, to see how many IT positions are there, how many different positions you can find when you type, when you choose the category IT in a job portals. And I did it based on Indeed.com, which is probably one of the biggest job portal, and I found more than 150, which you can see here, more than 150 different positions within IT, and they were all classified as IT. So what I did, I work on the data, I removed some duplicates, and I try to simplify it for you to make it a little bit easier, because if you are not, if you don't have IT background, probably those names doesn't tell you much, and it's very difficult to justify which career path is for you. So I always like this comparison that, saying that I'm an IT guy in 2020, it's like saying nothing, right? I mean, you could say I'm a doctor, right? And the how much different the cardiologist from the surgeon is, it's probably the same if you would try to compare some, C# developer with some database specialist, and they are both, of course, IT guys. And actually both paths are very interesting. So as I said, I try to simplify this for you. So I removed all the duplicates, and I just try to I combine different paths which were more or less similar, and this is what I end up with. So as you can see, it's still a pretty nice piece of spaghetti, right? I mean, there are still so many ways and so many different positions, but that's why we are doing this webinars. We are here to help you to understand what's the difference and what you can actually do. So that's why we will be focusing today. I narrowed this area to a smaller part, which is this part, and this is what we'll be mainly focusing today, and this what we'll cover in this webinar. So basically, among the others, specialization like IT analysts, sysadmins, database administrators, architects, and so on. I think the most common IT career path is something which is called a software developer, right? And within this, we can distinguish this very basic distinction between like backend developer and frontend developer, and from this point, you can go to even more narrow specialization, but basically I would stick to this distinction between a front end and back end, because even when you think of developing games, for whatever, for a PlayStation or mobile or whatever, it's still you can split it to this visual part and also to this to the graphic part and also to the backend part, right? And they are totally different. So we can make a small assumption, small summary stating that basically you can distinguish developer to those who are working on the visible part and also on this backend developers which are doing something, which are doing magic behind the scene, making sure that everything works as expected. So there are different paths, like there are different buzzwords. Probably you heard of artificial intelligence developers, or you might have heard machine learning and so on and so on. There are different paths like game developers, and the question is, where should you start? So this is like very first answer which we have to answer yourself before starting learning. So the one way to do it is just by kind of feeling this, right? I mean, this is somehow you feel that you always wanted to create games, right? So then probably you will go with the game developer path, and we'll cover this in the future. But basically, if you don't know how to start, this is the right place, because we will talk about this in a few slides. But before we get there, let's just quickly look at the numbers. So I check. I try to find the latest information about the salaries for the software engineers, for the software developers worldwide, and how they differ from each other depending on the country, depending on technology. So this data are from January 2020. So as you can see on the left side, the average software developer salary vary very much. I mean, they are so different depending on the country. So in US you can get $100,000, and they are all gross, by the way. So before taxation. So that's also something which is important for you to consider, because if you look at the numbers, they might look very sexy, but what you have to also take into account is that you need to think of all the taxation. Because if the taxation is up to 50%, it doesn't really matter if you're getting $100,000, because at the end you will get 50,000. So it might be better to go and get 80,000, but with like 20% tax. So as you can see, it very much depends on the country which you live. And also it also depends on your experience, of course, right? I mean, because you have to know that those salaries are average for the software developer, and the software developer is someone who has like between 2 and 5 years experience in the IT industry. I mean, the commercial experience. So here on the second screen you can see distinction between like the entry level job, so what you can get when you start your job, and what you can get after a few years working and mastering your IT skill. Okay. Secondly, the second distinction I found is the difference in salary, in income, based on the technology which you work, and also by the cities which you can find here. So as you can see, this is for the US. Those are data for United States. there are different salaries for different technologies, but you also need to know that this is not it's not constant, right? I mean, it doesn't mean that if today iOS developer is getting, almost as twice as whatever PHP developer, it's not constant, and it doesn't mean that it's not gonna change in the future, because this also vary depending on the technology. There are new technologies coming out. There are old technologies which becomes obsolete, and it's changing. So, for example, like the JavaScript developer. It was like a few years back. It was almost nothing, right? I mean, the JavaScript wasn't used so widely as it is right now. But if you can see right now, it's fourth well-paid programming language in US. And then, just for your information, and by the way, we are recording this stream, so you will be able to replay it in the future if you want to check something. Yeah, I'm just looking at the chat, and Patrick says that a lot of higher paying developers just in US is in California, which has a higher tax rates when compared to other states, plus the cost of living is extremely high. Yeah, that's perfectly true. I mean, I know developers myself which moved to Silicon Valley, and although they are making like a lot in compared to, let's say, European wages. But still, because Silicon Valley became so famous that everyone wants to live there and work there, and everyone wants to work for Facebook, Google, and so on, that the cost of living is very, very expensive. And at the end, if you take all this into account, it may turn out that you can have much better life living in, for example, let's say, Berlin or Singapore, where actually Singapore maybe is not the best example, but for example, Berlin, the cost of living is much lower than it is in Palo Alto, for example. Okay, guys, so let's get back to the main question. So which path is actually for me? So as I said before, if you there are two ways to justify that. I mean, the first is that if you already have some preference, you can just try to follow it, right? So if if artificial intelligence rings a bell, and you feel like you always wanted to do that, is something which drives you crazy, which makes you very enthusiastic, then you should probably go with it. But one important thing is that regardless of which specialization you're gonna choose, there is something which is called like common skill for developers, right? So there are skills which every developer should actually know. This kind of basics we're gonna learn during this webinar, during this session. So this is also important, that it doesn't matter which path you choose, there is always this kind of base line which everyone basically shares, right? So as I said, if you already have some preference, if you already knew that you always wanted to create games for PlayStation, or you want to be developer and developing another Witcher, well, that's fine, just carry on. But still, for example, the game industry is a difficult industry, I would say. The same applies, for example, to Java developers, because Java is mostly used in the corporations and in huge systems. So which means that it's very, very difficult to start learning or actually to start doing something which somehow is familiar to real use case, right? So when you start with, for example, front-end development, you can very quickly create something which is actually usable, and you can sell it to the customers. And when it comes to Java, you can go with all the basics, you can go with all the tutorials, but at the end, without the commercial experience, it's going to be difficult to find a job. And on the other hand, well, companies of course expect you to have this experience already when you join the company. So what I'm trying to say is that I personally think that the very best idea is to start with something which is like kind of easy to learn, and then just just do it, just learn more and more, find new. Try different things, try a little bit of front end, try a little bit of back end, then move on to, for example, some games which you can use, which you can play in a web browser. So as I said, if you have a preference, just follow it, but to think twice if you're thinking of artificial intelligence, if you think of Java, if you think of game development, this entry level. To get this entry level on the satisfying level, it's gonna be difficult. So, and on the other hand, if you don't know how to start, I would strongly encourage you to start with web development path. Why? First of all, I mean, as I said, there are something which is called which is like basics for each and every developer. So each and every developer has to know this, and these things doesn't change, right? So if you know variables, functions, and conditions, and so on, every time you change to different language, you will basically get the same. So you will kind of understand this one, and I have a feeling that this is the best way to learn this one is using like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and that's what we're gonna use today as well. So what I would suggest you is to follow this path more or less, of course. So I'll just go with the front-end development path, because this is very satisfying, because HTML, CSS, and JS, those are things which give you results immediately. So you are creating some program, you are creating some application, you are creating some website, and you can immediately see the result on your screen, which is, this motivation is very important, because programming isn't easy, right? Everyone can really get there, but let's be honest, you need to spend a lot of time and put a lot of effort to get there. So what I would suggest is to start with this front-end development path, go through it more or less this way, and then switch to a back-end developer part. And after that, once you do this kind of circle, first of all, you will kind of become a full stack developer, which means you are, flexible, and this flexibility is a very valuable thing, right? I mean, those developers which can really work both on the front and the back end, and they understand, right? I mean, I also believe that this wide IT knowledge, it's also very important thing to know. I would call this like IT DNA, right? I mean, it doesn't necessarily, if you are doing front end, you doesn't necessarily have to know, how the CPU is built. But knowing this might help you one day. So I also encourage you to, try different things and just, repeat, try, and see whether you like it or not. So this is the path which I would strongly encourage you to choose, and this is what this is kind of the path which we're gonna teach you in the future in the first place, because as I said, we are about to cover other development paths like game development and AI development, but we're gonna start with this one because we believe this is something which can help most of the people to start their IT career or to get this to gain this programming skills. And one important thing to mention is also that it's not we are talking about the IT career, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to, suddenly become a developer. No, it's not like that. I mean, I believe that in 2020, everyone should know the basics of programming. And this is simply because this is how our world is, and it's gonna be in coming future. So if you look at this, if you go to corporation, if you go whatever, to any company, you will have to deal with Excel sheets, you will have to go with Google Sheets, you'll have to write something, or you not necessarily have to, but probably you're not gonna, at a certain point of time, you're gonna stack, right? I mean, as a manager, you're gonna stack with, if you don't know pivoting tables in Excel, and if you don't know how to do macros. So even if you don't plan to become a web developer or developer at all, I still believe it's very, very worth to have this, to train this, IT skill, IT DNA, and programming basics, because what I'm going to show you at the very end of this webinar are like few small apps which you're going to build today, which already will make your life easier to some extent. Okay, so let's continue. So let's do our first steps in programming world. So as I said before, and let me quickly remind you, I shared this link in the chat. So I'm just gonna paste it again for people who joined a little bit later. So let's quickly navigate to this website. And guys, I suggest to install this text editor, but you don't have to. I mean, if you work, it can be any text editor, even like this one, right? You can also do this one, but I just suggest to start with to quickly install that one, because it's the Visual Studio, because it's going to be way easier. And secondly, just download these files. So if you click here, it will start downloading the file, and then if you go to the folder and unzip this folder, you will get this basics file and the file which we're gonna use in this webinar. And by the way, I also put the lesson files here, so all the examples which I'm gonna type right now, they're already there. So after webinar, you can just go through it again in case you forget something. So what we need to do to start is we have to open this basics folder. I have it here in our text editor. We have to open this file in a browser, and I'm gonna put it like here. So half of the screen will be browser, and half of the screen will be my text editor. Okay, so if you are there, if you open index file, you should see this kind of alert, I'm alive. And let's also open the console. So press F12 on your keyboard, or function F12. So you will get this kind of screen, as well. And you should see this kind of text. And my console works fine too. Okay, so yeah, if you are there, then let's continue. So as I said, we're gonna start from scratch, which means we're gonna start with using HTML and JavaScript, because that's the easiest way to start. As you can see, you just need the text editor and the web browser. So when you think of websites, they consist of three main parts. This is like HTML, which is our website structure. So every time you see like a table or navigation or some form, this is the HTML. Then you have CSS, which makes it looks nice. So it gives like color, some margins, whatever. And the JavaScript, which is basically taking care of the behavior of our website. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna focus on this HTML and Java, or actually Java itself today, and this is how we're gonna start with the with our basics. So let's have a look at the following example. So let's have a look at the following example. This is a very basic website which consists of HTML, some CSS, and some JavaScript here, right? So like the whole structure is like HTML file. This part is CSS, which we're not gonna focus on that today much, but we will cover this in the future. This is HTML, so this is like paragraph. P stands for paragraph. Then we have some JavaScript code, and at the end we also have some paragraphs. So let's you don't have to retype it. It's available in the lesson files, but you don't have to retype it. I'm gonna run it for you. So if you open the website, you will see that we have this before script, after script, and that before script change coloring to blue. And this is because we used this color me class on this element, so that's why this CSS change the color of the paragraph, right? So as we said, paragraph is HTML tag, CSS is meant to change the way it looks. There is a question from Jason: will there be a live stream recording available later? Yes, definitely there will be. So if you don't have it installed, don't worry, just focus and follow me. So the files will be available for you, and also the stream itself. Okay, so the first thing which we see here is that our code, like the code of almost any application, is being run from top to the bottom, right? So the code goes like this, and this is the way the code is executed, and also the way it's rendered. So as I said, there are some must-haves, there are some basics for each programmer, regardless of the language you are programming at. So let's now quickly prepare our workspace to work with the examples. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna just remove everything from our body. We also gonna remove CSS, and we're just gonna leave this very basic structure where actually we have just our script. And let's also remove this one, and let's start with comments. What comments are. So as you've seen, we have this piece of line which was responsible for showing us this display. And sometimes when you want to describe something which you are working on, or you want to leave a note for a future, and you basically want to create the piece of code which is not executable. In JavaScript, there are two ways to do it. So the first one is just to / and to write something like I'm not gonna be executed. If we save the file and refresh, you will see that nothing's really happened. We don't see anything on the screen. We don't see anything in the console because this wasn't executed. Why is it important? Because sometimes you want to comment out the piece of your code, like I did right here. And when you refresh, nothing really happens because this code isn't executed. Why I'm talking about this one? Because in the files which you will find in the zip, there are plenty of comments which are explaining everything which I'm gonna talk to you about right now. So just for information, there are two types of comments. You don't have to remember this by heart. You will always find this one. So this, if you want to comment out single line, it's like this using /. If you want to comment out multiple lines, just use this asterisk and slash in this combination. Okay, so let's get back to the coding itself. So the very basic and very important thing to start with are variables. So you can think of variables like a box, right? So we have a box which has some name. In this case, it has message, and we can put something into this box to carry some data, right? So we can create a variable, this box, which we called message, and we're gonna put the hello into this box. And then, of course, when we need it, we can always get this input out of the box, and we're gonna use it in the future. So let's see how does it work in the code. So firstly, we have to declare our variable. So how we're gonna do that? In JavaScript, we'll use this let keyword, and I'm not gonna go into details. Sometimes you may see also var keyword, but just don't worry. For now, you can use either of this. I'm gonna use let, and we'll cover this in the future in more advanced JavaScript training. So first we have to declare. Then we have to assign. So we have to put something into box. So I'm gonna assign, for example, a name Bob into it, and once we have this box, we can now use it. So I'm gonna use it in the way we did it before. So before we put text directly here, like hello world, and this text was displayed here. And I'm gonna use my variable to carry this message. So instead of hello world, I'm just gonna put my variable here. And as you can expect, it will display me Bob in a alert window. So this is first very basic thing. Now, just quick information that these two you can combine these two into actually one line. So you can do something like this. So we can declare and also assign immediately in one step, so it will just become shorter. Now, this declaring and assigning variable is kind of us giving input to the program, and there are different ways where program can give output to us. So one you already know, it's alert, but this is like kind of disturbing because you need to click OK every time. So there is another function which is called console.log, which will, instead of popping up the window, it will basically show us this in a console here, right? So let me quickly remind you that you can run console by pressing F12 or function plus F12 on your browser, and you can click on the console here. And let's stop here for a second, because you might notice that I've been using these semicolons. So basically, each line here in my code is like different operation for a program, for a web browser to use. And why do we need semicolons? Basically, our code, like this one, this console log, will work without semicolon at the end. So there will be no error, right? If we make some mistake, our console will show us the error, so which will help us to debug our code. And when we use it like this, it doesn't complain. So you can ask why would you need this why would you need this? There is a question from Krzysztof, so I'm gonna quickly read it and answer. Quick question: for now or later, sometimes people refer to code as a clean, not clean, and well documented or not. What's the real meaning behind the clean and documented? So basically, what the clean code means, like you can refer to this one like it's written using all the best practice. So you can imagine that you have code which is like written this way. So for example, I have some variable here, like my variable, and then I have, for example, my second variable, and you can have another variable. So as you can see, I'm using different naming convention for different variables. I can also do different intents, right? I can have some messy comments which are leftovers. So if you look at code like this, it will basically work. It will basically work. I mean, computer will understand this one, but we are not here to write a code for computers. We are here we are writing code for humans, right? Because there are humans who are gonna read this code. So the clean code means it's right in this way, where when you read it, you or someone else read your code, it immediately knows what different function means. For example, you can call a variable, let's say a, and then in 2 months, and it can do something. You can assign some magic number to this one, and in 2 months, when you get back to this code, you will for sure you won't remember what this a means. Why did you need this a variable? But we're gonna talk about this later. Actually, we have also video about clean code. So if you guys interested, you can also watch this later. I just posted the code. So long story make short, clean code and well documented is the code which can be easily read by others. So you write your code, you send it to someone else, and she immediately understand how it goes and what it's actually doing. Okay, so back to the semicolons. Why do we need semicolons? Because if we type like this, alert hello and alert world, computer will understand this one and it will work perfectly fine. So we have hello world, but if we want to put these two statements in one line, you will get error, right? Because it expects only single function in one line. So that's why you need semicolons to make this distinction. It informs computer, it informs compiler that this is where the function ends and this is where the new one starts. So as long as you use new, when you use new line for every function, you don't need them. But again, some people believe that it's good practice to put them in the end of each statement, and for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just gonna do the same. There is also it's also rated to something which is called strict mode, but I'm not gonna get into this because it's more advanced stuff for today. Okay, so coming back to variables, right? So as we said, we can variables carry some message and they are reusable, right? So we can use the same variable, this message variable, to carry different kind of data. So what does it mean for us? It means that we can basically once we assign some value to this my variable, we can update it later, stating that my variable we want my variable to be Bob now. And as you can see, first it's David, we print it out here, and secondly we change the name to Bob, so we can reuse it. Okay. There another important thing for you guys to know is that we have different variable types. So now we've been using variable like David, like Bob, but these variables were carrying like string, like piece of characters, right? But there are different type of variables. So for example, the one which we already know, so let's call it like, let message be hello, and let's print it out. But before we do that, let's also declare new variable which will be or actually no, let's just update message, and now let it be like 1, 2, 3, and let's print it out again. So as you can see in a console, the first one is great and second is bluish, and this is because JavaScript knows or try to know what kind of value is there, whether we are talking about like set of characters, like the word or phrase, or we are dealing with number. In different languages you have to explicitly say, for example, this variable will carry on numbers and this variable will carry on string. In JavaScript you don't necessarily have to do it. That's why, as I said, it's easy to start with this one when you are like totally new to programming. And there is one function in JavaScript which is called type of. So if we again print to the console type of, so what I'm doing, I'm calling console log to print to the console. I'm calling function type of, which will tell me what kind of variable it is, and I'm providing argument, and we're going to talk about functions and arguments very, very soon. So as you can see, the first time when we use message, it says it's string, and secondly when we reassign 1, 2, 3 or 123, actually it says it's number. And why is it actually so important? I'm gonna show you right now. So let's think of some number. Let's create a variable and just call it, and just assign 123 to it. And let's create another variable. So let's call it m, and let's assign 2.5 to it. So as you can see, if when it comes to dealing with numbers, we can use different kind of numbers. And let's define another variable which will be k, and what we want to do, we want to multiply n by m, and we want to see what the results gonna be. So as you can see, the result is basically the result of multiplication to 2.5 by 123, which gives like 307.5. We can of course, add these numbers to each other, and the result will be different. But now let's try to do something else, and let's try to change this m variable to, let's say, 5. But please note that I use quotation marks, so it's not number anymore, it's string, right? So, well, do you think what the output could be? It's like 1235. Well, something doesn't work, right? Well, actually it works, but it works differently than we would expect expect it to work. So what happened is that because basically, we could, instead of putting 5, we could put here like David, right? Any string would do. So what JavaScript is trying to do is trying to be smart. So since, of course, it cannot multiply David 123 times, because what does it mean, right? What do you want to print like David 123 times, or what are you gonna do with it? So basically, it's trying, since it cannot, treat both variables as a number, what it's doing is treating both of them as a string. So if we check at the end, by the way, you can type here in a code, but you can also type in a console. So for example, if you type n, you will see the value of n, and you can also type functions here. So you can do alert n, and it will just immediately run your code. So as you can see, to start coding with JS, you don't even need actually editor. You can just use the browser. But for the sake of clarity, I'm just gonna use this text editor for you, because it has coloring and so on. So coming back to the question, we added 2 variables. So let's see what will be the type of k, and this is of course string. So as I said, JavaScript tries to be smart, and it converts both variables to string. So I hope that now you can clearly understand why it is important to be aware of the fact that there are different kind of variables, right? So you have like string, you have numbers, you have also others, but we're not gonna really care much about this one at the moment. For you to remember is that there are different kind of variables, and 2, like the very or most common, are like strings, which carry on some text, and that there are numbers on which you can do operations. Okay, so since we know that we can do operation like math, like a plus b plus c and so on the numbers, it's also important to know that we can do other operation on strings. And let me give you a quick example. So let's create some variable like name, and let's call it John, or actually not call it, but let's assign John. Let's give a city. Let's say Mumbai. And let's provide the age, which will be number, and let's say that John is 35 years old. So what we can do, we can create new variable, which we're gonna call message, and we can add, or actually concatenate to be precise. So we can join few strings each other to create a new string. So let's do it like this. Hi, my name is, and we're gonna use plus here. Now we're gonna use variable name plus dot at the end of the sentence. I am plus 35, oh sorry, not 35, plus age, of course, and I live in city. So let's run it, and let's see what the value of message is. Hi, my name is John, I'm 35 and I live in Mumbai. So this is how you can do different operation also on a strings. Okay, and finally, I mean, of course, there are a lot more information to know about variables, but for now, I think I'm pretty sure it's enough. Just last thing about variables, which I want you to know, is also to be aware that there are different kind of variables which are called arrays. So let's just think of, because let's imagine that we are building, like, I don't know, some marketplace for cars, right? So obviously we're gonna have hundreds of different brands. So instead of doing and defining this like brand number 1, let it be BMW. Brand number 2, let it be Volvo. Brand number 3, let it be Saab. So as you can imagine, we would quickly end up with the very long list of the variables. So instead of doing doing this like that, we can use arrays. And arrays are a special variable which can hold more than one value at the time. So if you have a list of items, a list of the car names or names, employees or whatever, storing them in the single variable could look like this. So let brands equal to, and now we use square brackets, and we're gonna provide all the brand names. So, and the last one was Saab as far as I remember. So now if we try to print brands, you will see that we have this kind of error. And we're gonna learn in the other episodes how to loop through the arrays, how to use it. But just for you to remember, this is really powerful kind of variables, because it makes life of developers way easier when it comes to deal with different sets and subsets of data. Okay, so we have variables, so we do understand what it does, how it works, how to use it. So let's move to the next point, which are functions. So you may heard this this word in the past. You might heard of functions when you were studying math, right? So you had like different functions in the math. And when I was studying IT, the way they explained it to us was like, think of the function like of the vending machine, right? So the functions, like you can see here, they have some input. So you put something in, and sometimes, but not always, you get something out, so you get some output. So it's exactly the same like with the vending machines, right? So you have some inputs, you had some coins, and you also put some numbers into it. So if you depending on the input, so depending on how many coins you're gonna put into the vending machine, and depending on which number you're gonna choose, the machine or the function will behave differently. So sometimes it may sometimes it can just give you like Coke or whatever you ordered. Sometimes it can just tell you that, sorry, I'm out of order, or actually the Coke is sold out, right? So I think this is a pretty nice comparison. And secondly, for the people who are more into math, you can think of function like the mathematical functions, right? So we have this like f on x. And you can have this function defined like, f on x equals like x power, or x multiplied by 5, or, whatever. And here we have some example of more complex function, like, so f of x equals that, let it be x power if x is even. And if it is not, if it is odd, let's just return like x plus 5, right? And if we were on the math classes, we could just draw this kind of line to visualize it. But you can just imagine that, right? That if we provide like f, this argument, right? So x is our argument. So if we provide like 2 as an argument, we'll get here. So the function will return 4, right? Because x power is gonna be 2 power gonna be 4. And if we're gonna provide 3, then we will get here. So 3 is odd. So our function will increase it by 5 and return 8. So how the function looks like in programming. So let's just start with example, because I think it's so self-descriptive that you're gonna understand it out of the box. So we're gonna create function which will show some message, right? Okay, so we have our function here. We defined our function, so we expect this. To this function. Sorry guys, I just frozen because I saw some dump in the connection, so I hope you didn't lose it because it's showing me some 10 seconds interruption. Okay, so we have a function, so we could probably expect now to see this alert. So let's refresh our page and let's see what's gonna happen. Whoops, nothing actually happens. So did we do something wrong? Not really. So what we did, we defined our function, but we haven't used it yet, right? So this is like the definition, it's like declaration of our function, like we create our variable like we were doing this before, and even assigning something to it, but until we don't use it, it's not gonna do anything to our program. So we have to call our function now. So if we call it without arguments so far, we will see this alert message here. Okay, but why do we actually need these functions, right? So quite often we need to perform like a similar actions in many places of the script, and we're gonna see that very soon on example. So we're gonna build some small piece of code, and when we're gonna check whether the person who is using our app is adult, right? So whether it's over 18 or not, yeah, you can imagine that in application like this piece of code to check whether this given person is adult or not, we're gonna be massively used. So instead of writing this condition to check in each and every piece of our program, we're gonna create function and we're gonna reuse this one. So why this is important? I mean, on example, you can see that, for example, let's say that our show message would be more complex and would be doing some math here. I'm gonna do some very simple math here, and let's see, equals a b divided by 10 and multiplied by a plus a. And instead of saying hello world, we want to show what's the value of c, right? So this is giving me some output. And now, assuming that I want to use it in some other place in my code, I would have to just repeat this code over and over again. And this is, by the way, example of unclean code when we repeat the same piece of code. Instead, what we can do, we can simply call our function a few times. So I will refresh the page now. See, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So when we have to repeat something, then we can create function, and this will help us to automate this thing. Okay, so now let's talk about the arguments. So this function didn't accept any arguments, so it's doing some maths based on his internal values. Let's update our function, and let's say that we want our function to accept arguments. So here it is. So we have argument, and now instead of doing some hard-coded value, right? So this will be always the same value. We want to pass an argument to our function, which means that depending on how we're gonna call this function, so let's actually make it a little bit more sexy. So let's say we're gonna greet someone. So hello, an argument, and we're gonna say hello to Lisa, to Dave, and that should be enough. So we have hello Lisa, hello Dave, right? So depending on the argument, our function behaves differently. Okay, of course, except for the strings, we can pass numbers as an argument to our function. So let's just create a function power, which will basically multiply the number by itself. So let's print it in the console this time. X multiplied by x, and let's call power for 2, power for 10, and as you can see, I just refreshed, as you can see in the result, we are getting this this result here for different arguments, right? And obviously this is this is very useful when you create some mathematically advanced functions, when you calculate something, and you can just quickly call it and use it. And by the way, at the end of this webinar, we're gonna create a small application, a small app, which will help us to calculate and change the value from to calculate the net and the gross value, including or excluding tax, based on the gross or the net value or amount. So you're gonna see like the real life example which you can create. But before there, let's try last thing. Let's try to call it with argument like string. Refresh the page, and this is another important thing for you to remember, is that sometimes when you mess up with badly with different type of variables, JavaScript will display you something like none, which stands for not a number, which means that basically we screwed up something, like in this case when we try to multiply David by himself. Okay, so we know that we can pass value to our function. So now let's talk about returning value. So as we said, our vending machine can accept some arguments, can accept some input, but it can also give us something back. In that case, instead of printing out this number here, we're gonna say return and the same formula which we used before. So return x multiplied by itself. So let's try to run it now, and nothing really happens. And this is because the function runs, but nothing is really expecting the result of the function. So if we are running or using function like this, we need to assign the result of the function to some example variable. So let's call it result, and let's assign result of our function. And now let's print this out. So I'm gonna refresh it, and as you can see now the result is being printed, but not here directly, but at this point of time. Another interesting thing is that you can call function within another function. So this is function console log is JS function which is doing something. It's printing text over here to our console, And inside this function, we can call our power function, and the result will be pretty much the same. Let's choose another number to see that it's changed. So now it's changed. Now, so this return is quite important keyword, because this is how it returns the result of our function, result of our calculation. And what you have to know is that you can use this this word return in a couple of places in your code, but every time you hit this one, it stops function and it doesn't go further. So let's to give you an example of multiple returns, we'll introduce now the new programming concept, which is conditions. So again, let me quickly start with a piece of code, and let's create a function which will basically validate age for us. And as a parameter, we will accept age. And now we're gonna use something new, which is called condition. So I'm gonna say that if my age is above 17, so 18 and more, then I'm gonna return adult. And as you can see, the return can accept different kind of data, so strings, numbers, and so on. However, in other way, so if the age isn't above 17, then we want to return underage. Now let's call this function. By the way, as you can see, this is the advantage of using advanced text editor, because it's proposing me the name of the function, so I can just press tab and I don't have to type it. So let's refresh it. Oh, I didn't. By the way, this is something which happens very often. So typos. I didn't provide the brackets and the argument to the function, right? So as a result, I've seen in the console something which I didn't expect it. So this can be very irritating at some point, but don't worry if this happens to you, it's normal. So let's call our function twice, first for argument 15 and then for 30. And as you can see, the first one is saying this underage and the second one is saying it's adult. So this is how the condition works. So so basically this is like, you know, it's you can rephrase it like this: if this condition is true, so whatever condition we put it here, it will always give us either true or false. And when it's true, then this piece of code will be executed. And if this is not true, then that piece of code will be executed. So I hope it's pretty much self-explanatory. The other important thing for you to remember is that we doesn't necessarily have to have this else statement, right? So sometimes we want to react only on this condition. Only when it's true, then we want to do something else, but we don't care for other cases. If they are not true or if they're false, if they are not met, we don't care about it. And I can show you. And let's now quickly write the function to visualize where that can be useful. So we're gonna have new function. We're gonna call it play movie, but because this movie can have some, war scenes, it requires, be to above certain age. So if age is, below 19, which basically means or actually below 18. Then what we want to do is we want to raise an alert stating that this underage spotted, and we will stop our function. To stop, we just do empty return, so we don't do anything. And in other case, we will just do playing. We will play. So now refresh. Oh, of course we have to call it first, but we can do it from here. So we have play movie for 14 years old. So what happens here, right? Our condition is triggered, and we are stopping function, and we will not reach this piece of code, right? And then if we do it for a proper age, we'll just skip this condition. So what's important to remember is that you don't necessarily always have to this else condition. Now, as I said, this condition is always, it has to evaluate either to true or false, right? One of these two. So let's quickly talk about another variable type, which is Boolean. And what is interesting about this variable is that it can accept only two values. It's either true or false, and there is no other way. You can also use 0 and 1. So 1 is true, 0 is false, and that's it. And this is why this is important, because you're gonna see when you start programming, you're gonna see lot of different example of usage this one, because basically every single condition is always like the condition which at the end is either true or false. And you also will see a lot of functions which returns either true or false, and let me just quickly name a few of them, right? So this is like, this function will tell us whether it's adult or not, right? So, and the result is true or false, and then we continue. So we don't do any checks here, whether it's even, it's allowed, permitted, and so on and so on. So this is like the naming convention, and this is also important. Important to mention that there is you should always use this kind of descriptive name. So this, again, coming back to the clean code, right? If our function name is like ABC, if you come back to your code after 2 months, you're not gonna remember what this function was doing. And if you call it like is even or is allowed or is permitted, you will immediately know that this function is checking whether someone is permitted to do something, and it returns true or false. So this naming convention is also very, very, very important. Okay, so the booleans, they are just true or false. Okay, let's continue. So talking about the names, talking about the naming convention, let's get back to our previous functions which we wrote before. So we had this validate age, and we had this play movie code. Let's try to rewrite it in a better way, in a proper way. So there is this rule in programming world that the function should do one thing, should be responsible just for one thing. So we should avoid this like a very huge functions which are doing 10 things at a time, because they are very difficult to read, and it's also very difficult to fix it in case something goes wrong. This is for example the piece of code which is actually doing something against the best practices, because this function is checking the age itself here. And for example, if we were about to write some function like play game, which also requires this age check, we would have to, reuse the same piece of code here. And in case, in the future we want to change this limit, the age limitation from, 19 to 15 years old, we'll have to do it in like multiple places. So how this code should actually looks like. Let's start from scratch. So since we need to know whether our person is adult, and doesn't really matter whether what this adult means. It can be 18, it can be 20, it doesn't really matter. So what we want to do, if we want to check whether age is above 17, and by the way, this is a good place. This is good moment to also quickly talk about the comparisons. So we are basically checking whether someone is above 17, which means 18 and more. But we could also use different comparison and say that that age is above or equal to 18, right? So basically it will work the same, but I think this is more clear because this 18 is kind of clear to everyone. On the other hand, if we would like to say that we want people who are only and exactly 18 years old, we could use this comparison, like two equal signs. So now don't make a mistake and don't use single one, because as you remember, one was assignment, right? So we had let my var equals David, right? So the single one is assignment and the double one is comparison. Okay, so if our age is greater or equal 18, then we want to return true, and otherwise we want to return I made the typo, return okay. So as you can see, this function now does just a single thing, and this is very good practice. So this is checking whether the person is adult or no. Now in our play movie function, what we're gonna do is we're gonna check, but we're gonna check if is adult, which is very self-descriptive, and in case it's not, we're gonna say sorry, too young, and stop our program. And otherwise, actually not even otherwise, just we don't need else here. We'll just say playing movie. So let's call this function, refresh. Oops, that's something. Oh, something doesn't work. Let me quickly check. Function play movie age. If is adult. Age is let me quickly debug this one. Is adult. Age 15. So now you can see real-time debugging. So when you write a function and it doesn't work, you have to console log 15 for some reason. If age for some reason it's not going into this condition. Is adult. 15. Why it's not going into this? Age equals okay, so if age is 15, so why this is not going? If age is equals 17. Let me quickly start from scratch. Is adult. Okay, so now it works. Is adult false? And now let's play movie. Okay, so as you can see, after some troubles, we managed to get this working. Now when we want to create another function, like I don't know, play games, we don't. Oh, actually, we didn't use this function here. Okay, that's how it should look. Okay, so now as you can see, if we want to check the age in our other function, we just reuse this piece of function and we don't have to write this piece of code again and again and again and again. Okay, so we'll be finishing part about the function and going to the last part of the webinars for the loop. Just one more update. Just one more update about the comparisons. So we check this one, like function compare var so if var equals to 5, then var Okay, so let's see that as we know, we can compare numbers, but we can also compare strings. So for example, if we call it like this, I need to refresh. So if we do it like Peter, it says false, and if we do it like David, it says true. So we can compare, we can post strings as well. Okay, and just coming to the end, I just wanted to show you the resolution of the function which we shown here. So you can find it in the files which you download. So the problem which we drawn here is if can be easily solved with this few lines. So this is our function, as you might remember. This function basically is checking. This is the modulo operator, so it's checking whether the rest from dividing the number by 2 is either 0 or something else. So if it is 0, then it's even, and we will return power, and otherwise we'll return this +5 value. So let's just quickly check that it works here. For 2 it returns power, and for 5 it returns 10 because it's 5 plus 5. Okay guys, so I prepared also the loops, the lesson about loops for you, but it's already 1.5 hours, so I'm not gonna keep you so long. So the very last thing which I want to show you are 2 examples of the usage which can be useful for you in the daily life. For the first one, you will find in the lesson files in the local time. So this is the one, and if you run it, this is for the people who frequently travel in a different time zones. So if you open this one, you can see that it's showing me the local time in different cities, right? And I'm not gonna go through it in details. We are using here the new variable type, which is date. We're gonna have another lesson on this one, but I just want to show you that if we remove comments from here, then we will end up with, like, I don't know how many, let's see. We'll end up with 7 lines of code, which basically can already give you and can be useful for the frequent travelers. So you basically specify the city and the difference in the time zone. So what's the difference in number of hours? And you can already make use of it, having this file on your desktop and just knowing what's the local time. And we'll create also the more advanced time, which won't require you to specify this time difference by yourself, but we will calculate. But this is more advanced stuff, so we'll leave it for later. And the other example which I prepared for you, which you will also find in the files, is the Vat calculation. So for example, if we have a price 100 and the VAT is 15%, when you click on it, it will show you in the console what is the net price. So this is like 0.86% of the original value. So actually we should multiply this one, and also the gross one. So without going into details, I just encourage you to have a look at this one. And again, look at this one. This is just 5 lines of code, and you can just create a very simple and very useful the VAT calculator for yourself. So if you are in the business, and if you need to deal with this kind of calculation or any other calculation, you can very quickly create a very small form by yourself and make use of it. So thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions, please post them right now. And again, I encourage you to subscribe to our A newsletter, B to our Slack community, because there you'll find the support first of all. So if you have any questions, then you should just post there, and we have a team of developers, experienced developers, which are there to help you. And secondly, if you subscribe to for the newsletter, we're gonna send you information about next classes. And finally, I also wanted to show you that we are working on this. We prepared actually this roadmap for you guys, so you can see that on the web page as well, which is showing the very detailed roadmap for you. If you want to become a web developer, what you have to learn, what kind of skills you have to gain, what kind of skills you have to gain by yourself. So this is the one. So if you check this, you'll see that here each and every step is described and explain what part of different languages and specification and technologies you should learn, and we're gonna cover them one by one in our future webinars and in our future lessons and tutorials. And you can actually start already today by going to mdbootstrap.com, and if you check our tutorials, so if you go to mdbootstrap.com/education, you will find free of charge tutorials on different technologies, including very advanced one like Vue, React, PHP, progressive web app, and so on and so on. Okay, guys, thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for staying with me. If you have feedback for us, just please do not hesitate to share it. Please do not hesitate to contact us. So I will leave an email to myself, so feel free to contact me. You can also find me on Twitter. This is my username, my surname, my name and surname. So feel free to contact me if you have any questions. And also, thank you for watching. And if there are any questions, I will stay a couple of minutes more. I will stay to answer the questions. Okay, I've got the question from Przemek. Where does this 15 number comes from? Okay, so I will get back to our example quickly and try to explain this one. Okay, 15. So let's redo what we've been doing. Okay, so I think this was the place where this 15 was. It's good to hear, Przemysław, that it turned you on becoming nerd over 40. I think this 15, the question you posed, Przemek, was coming from here. So I was calling a function here with the argument 15, and then because it didn't work, I was trying to use this console log to debug it, right? So I put it here because the code execution was basically from here to this function and then down. So I was checking what value is coming at this point. Then it was going into this condition if adult, and I was passing the same age again. So then it was jumping to this function, and I was trying to see what are the values and why it didn't work before. So that's why it was doing. So this is kind of debugging you do every time when something doesn't work. You try to just check, analyze line by line, and see where the issue is coming. Okay. Okay, guys, so if there are no other questions, let me quickly check. Then thanks again for watching, and see you on the next webinar. Hi, thank you.